Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Maureen Callahan, author and columnist at Daily Mail. Maureen, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me, Brittany.
If you can believe it, a weekend separates us from Election Day. And the past week, something that really has been in the news has been garbage commentary from both sides. It started on Sunday when an opening act at Trump's MSG rally called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage. Then a few days later, President Biden called Trump supporters garbage. And you're saying that is Kamala Harris's October surprise. Can you elaborate on that for us?
Yes, of course. Now, with the floating island of garbage comment, I am in no way excusing it. It was disgusting and an unforced error. And you take that context free and it sounds exactly what the left is saying it is, right? Which is racist, xenophobic, all of the worst aspects of MAGA. The truth is there has been a decades-long environmental crisis plaguing Puerto Rico, which is overrun with trash. And it has been negatively impacting wildlife, water, air, soil, and the residents themselves. Okay, that aside, Biden then, while Kamala is making her quote-unquote closing argument on the steps of the Capitol, site of the January 6th riots, Biden decides he's going to meet with Latino voters, and call Trump supporters the only garbage he sees out there. The White House very quickly tried to do some triage there and insert an apostrophe into supporters, claiming that that was just meant for the comic, but anyone who is in any way sane and trust their own sensory inputs, right? I heard what I heard. I saw what I saw. I know what you said. You just called Trump supporters garbage. It is an echo of the Hillary Clinton deplorables moment in 2016. And if anything is going to motivate people to the polls, it's something like this. And I think really the only question is, does Biden know what he's doing when he's doing this stuff? Is he trying to shiv Kamala in the waning days because he's embittered about being forced out, and who wouldn't be? I think yes. I don't know what you think, but I think definitely.
I mean, I think that he tried cleaning it up. That's what he said. He said it was an error. I mean, everyone listened to it. There was a pause after he said supporters, and then he kept going. So when you hear that, but he is no longer the candidate anymore, is this as bad as the Hillary Clinton deplorables comment because she was the candidate? Is it as bad as the 2012 Mitt Romney 47% commentary? Because when you look at these flashpoints in certain campaigns, you're like, you can kind of, when it's all said and done, maybe next week, maybe when there's a post-mortem of this election, you can pinpoint certain events and say, oh, was a turning point. Do you think this has the same effect?
I do. And I think because it doesn't exist in a silo. You know, it's not an isolated thing. This is days after you have MSNBC and any other left-leaning outlet you could find. I mean, on MSNBC, they literally interspersed footage of the 1939 Nazi rally at MSG with what was going on with Trump's rally at MSG. They're calling him and his supporters Nazis. They're calling him Hitler. And when you use this kind of inflammatory rhetoric, you know, I had a colleague at the Mail who went to that rally and said it wasn't just sort of the kind of crowd you might expect. What I mean by that is elites on the left, like working class, bridge and tunnel, Long Islanders, New Jerseyans. It was also, there were Jews, there were gays, there were, people who looked of a higher socioeconomic class. There were Manhattanites there. There are people who are, sort of coming out of the closet as Trump supporters. So I think on the heels of that, it absolutely just underscores everything that the left is doing to MAGA Nation.
I think when you look at this last week, you see a lot of commentary being seized upon people who are either you're a candidate or you're not. Their comments are being picked upon. Let's talk about them because we saw the garbage comments. We saw Trump saying he's going to protect women whether they like it or not. That made headlines. Mark Cuban saying no strong or intelligent women surround Trump. Trump's commentary on Liz Cheney. Do you think any of this commentary impacts the swing voter at all? Because as we know, this race, according to the polls, are neck and neck. It's coming down to those 7 battleground states. So let's say you're a Pennsylvania swing voter. You're seeing all of this. Do you care?
I think that you do. And I think the reason is, if you are a swing voter who is potentially leaning towards Trump, and you are hearing this stuff lobbed at you constantly, and I think this is really the problem with Kamala's campaign in general. She's not really running for something that we can get our arms around. She's running in opposition to Trump. And what that comes with is a lot of name calling and derogatory speech that is directed not just at the candidate, but at anybody who is thinking of voting for him. It's like, if you're going to call me, I'm just saying me in the general sense, a Nazi, a piece of garbage, a racist, a xenophobe, I might be more motivated to vote against you.
Well, it's interesting because that was supposed to be her closing argument, that speech on the ellipse. It was supposed to harken back to January 6th and show a contrast. I'm assuming that's what she wanted. And then instead, no one's talking about what was said then. It's instead President Biden's garbage commentary. And she did try to distance herself. She said, hey, he clarified that, but I don't want to insult any person, any American, based on who they vote for. What should she be doing for her closing argument? Is that distance enough? What do you think?
This is so interesting, Brittany, because the morning after she did, I don't know if you happen to catch this, but she did sort of an impromptu little Q&A with a gaggle of reporters before she was boarding Air Force Two. So, of course, first we get the whir of the engines, so we can't hear quite as well as we might. She's asked, have you spoken to Biden since those remarks? She says, well, he called me last night, but that didn't come up. That didn't come up? It's days to go, and it's a potentially fatal wound. You're trying to stanch the bleeding. That didn't come up. I don't believe you. This is her problem. She's inauthentic. Then she's asked, what does she think of that statement? Does she agree with it? Instead of showing some humanity and saying, absolutely not, I disavow that. I don't think that's what he meant, but make no mistake, I don't think that way about anybody who's voting for my opponent. She couldn't do it. She's into this flowery, velvety, I'm kind of dancing around this issue. This is the fundamental problem with her campaign.
In 2020, Biden's referendum on Trump, that was an effective campaign. In 2024, based on the polls, I don't think that appears to be enough for the American people. What do you think she's offering aside from a referendum on Trump? Because what it seems like is, I'm offering the status quo, but according to polls, most Americans don't like the status quo. Most Americans don't like the direction we're going or where we are right now.
They don't. And I think that's why you're seeing them lean so far into abortion, women's rights, this talk about strong, intelligent women. Trump hates that. I think they're leaning in very hard to that because every other issue, be it the border, soft on crime policies, the economy, the Dems have a losing track record. And you're even seeing this shift in New York City, historically blue. Kamala will win New York City, no doubt, but that Trump is eating away at this is telling people a lot.
I was talking to a pollster the other day, and he said he thinks that this election is coming down to not Trump v. Harris necessarily, but it's Trump v. Trump and Harris v. Harris. They're their biggest enemy and greatest asset. When you're thinking about Trump v. Trump, in the last final days until Election Day, what do you think he should be doing to, get people to vote for him?
Trump has a woman problem in much the same way Kamala has a man problem. And I think that Trump would do well to lean on female surrogates, Nikki Haley in particular, to just reassure women that he is for them, that abortion rights, though they've been turned back to the states, are safe and will not be threatened. And just sort of soften up that image a little bit. But I do kind of think the die is cast at this point.
Do you think his comments on Liz Cheney last night are fatal to A, the Nikki Haley voter that might be on the fence about him, B, women in general, him conjuring that image of Liz Cheney facing a row of guns? The context is important, obviously. He was saying, I want to read what he said, actually. I'll read what he said
great.
and then get your commentary. He said this: "She's a radical war hawk." She, meaning Liz Cheney. "Let's put her with a rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her, okay? Let's see how she feels about it. You know, when the guns are trained on her face. You know, they're all war hawks when they're sitting in Washington in a nice building saying, oh, gee, let's send 10,000 troops right into the mouth of the enemy." So do you wish he tamped down that language? What do you think?
Yes, he could really do without it. He really could. It's not, again, when you have a woman problem, don't put that image into the minds of female voters. Liz Cheney facing down the barrel of 9 automatic weapons. Like, it's not necessary. You could cut that part out and just leap to these, war hawks in nice federal buildings sending your sons and daughters to die. That's enough. Done.
Yeah, and we are days away, as I said, from a historically close election, according to the polls. What are you looking out for between now and Tuesday?
Honestly, I think the data is not going to move very much. This race is neck and neck. And, what I'm really paying attention to, honestly, Brittany, is sort of what's in the ether and the conversations that I'm hearing and taking part in behind closed doors. And these are people who are more often than not saying, I was a never Trumper, but this time I'm going to go for him.
Why do you think people are now having those conversations? And do you think they are the quiet Trump voters we saw in 2016 where, Democrats were surprised when Trump won because people were silently voting for Trump? Do you think we're seeing that in 2024?
I think that we might. Yeah, I really do. I think, they're saying that the polls have adjusted for their fatal mistakes in 2016 when it was predicted that Hillary had it in the bag. No question. But I do think that's part of the reason you're seeing this extremely inflammatory demagoguery on the left, this hysterical use, while they constantly claim for Trump's rhetoric to be dialed down. The Nazism, the Hitlerism, what have you, the fascist, he's going to be a dictator on day one. The New York Times, their op-ed section last Sunday, the front page was like, he's going to round up everybody, throw them in prison, do mass deportations, use the military against American citizens. This is hysterical language. It's not helping, but I think it's reflective of the real panic that the left is feeling and that we're even hearing out of leaks from Kamala's own campaign. They're very worried.
Yeah, you're hearing Democrats saying to me, saying to the media, saying to others, hey, if Trump wins, democracy won't be the same. He is a threat to democracy. When you hear that, you think that's overblown?
First of all, 100%. We lived through a first term. Democracy is intact. January 6th, terrible. His behavior, deplorable. But we did not wind up with Americans in concentration camps. We did not wind up with a dictator. He did leave office. I don't think this is in any way landing with people whose concerns aren't this sort of theoretical, excuse my language, BS. Like, they're concerned about, can they put food on the table without having to worry about if they can also gas up the car, or the migrant crisis that is infiltrating many American cities, soft on crime policies that are having a direct impact, the trans issue, which is bigger than the Democrats would love for their constituents to believe. I think that these are the real issues that are going to animate people when they go to the polls.
Well, there's certainly a lot to look out for between now and November 5th and even beyond. And Maureen, I hope you come back on and break it down with me. Thank you so much for joining me.
I would love to. Thanks so much for having me, Brittany.